And I'm not able to without being the host or given permission by the host.
Okay.
We'll trust your system.
Good. Well, welcome everybody to this virtual Zoom interview with Kimber Lanning and Amy Bird. My name is Doug Bland, and I'm Executive Director for Arizona Interfaith Power and Light, which is a spiritual response to the climate crisis. And this interview is a part of a series that we're doing based on our effort to get out the vote and get people more involved as the very critical November election approaches. It's an election that will set the tone for the future of democracy, we think, and the future of our planet as well. So there are a couple ways that we're inviting people to get involved. One way is to pledge to vote and to vote with climate justice in mind. So there is a link that I put in the chat where you can download that pledge and sign up. Our goal is to get 3,000 at least pledges in Arizona. And then even more daunting is the Faith Values Voters Guide that covers a number of issues, including the one that we're talking about today with Kimber about creating an inclusive economy. There are other issues like moral health care in a time of pandemic, the dignity, honoring the dignity of LGBTQ folk, a number of different issues that you can use for your own reflection or for group study if you want. So you can download that. And our goal there is 10,000 downloads of that Values Voters Guide. So the topic, as I mentioned, that we're exploring today is an inclusive economy, a more just economy. And I can't think of anybody better to have on that than Kimber Lanning. Kimber is founder and director of Local First Arizona and Local First Foundation. She started as an entrepreneur and business person and has been a go-to person for and a mover and shaker for establishing a more local economy. And she's being interviewed by Amy Bird, who works with RSF Social Finance. It's an organization that is trying to help us think about new ways of working with money. That money is, as she tells me, the power to do good things in the world. So Amy and Kimber, I'll turn it over to you and let you be in conversation with each other. I'll mention that we are taking a little different approach. Rather than just talking about the issues, we're taking a storytelling approach. And so we'll be having the opportunity to hear some of Kimber's story. And we're inviting you, as you listen to her story, to think about your own story of advocacy and how you became passionate about the things that you're passionate about. Amy?
Thank you so much, Doug. And Kimber, thanks for the opportunity to have this conversation with you.
I'm thrilled. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, I've heard you speak different times in different settings about the work of Local First, the importance of a resilient, thriving local economy that works for everyone. And I wondered if you could get us started by sharing just whether it's a story or a sense of how you felt drawn into this work.
You know, it is most definitely a journey that has many stories associated, but one that really stands out for me is speaking to a woman that was a stranger to me, and we were waiting in line for something, and she said to me, boy, this place is nothing like Chicago where I grew up. And she talked about how wonderful Chicago was and Illinois in general. And I was kind of doing the internal eye roll because I've lived here my whole life and I'm an Arizona girl through and through. And just standing there talking, she lowered her voice and kind of leaned into me confidentially. And she said, boy, you guys sure have made a mess out here in Arizona. And I was so taken aback by that, that I started to ask her questions. And I said, oh, you guys. And I was going over that in my mind. And I said, oh, you don't live here? And she said, no, I live here. And I said, oh, well, you haven't lived here very long then. And she said, no, I've lived here 15 years. And so I said, so who is you guys? You know, you're one of us now. And so again, I started asking her questions, and I found out she had never voted here, lived here 15 years, had never voted. She gave charitably back in Illinois. And I began to realize that this connection to place runs deep, and it shapes our behaviors, and it shapes our hope for the future. It shapes our participation. And I began to really think about the role that independently owned businesses and local commerce play in shaping the way people feel about their place. And it was sort of became clear to me in an instant that one of the challenges we had here in Arizona is that our local businesses didn't have a strong enough voice, and that people would move here from other places where they clearly had local favoritism. You know, this woman loved her local restaurants, loved her local businesses, and she told me so. But yet she came out here and she didn't seek the local businesses out and assumed that we didn't have any. And, you know, geographically, we're laid out in such a way that our corners are all occupied by big national chains that you can find anywhere, our intersections. And so it was really that compelled me to start shaping a voice for local businesses. I'm a small business owner myself, so I knew what it was like firsthand to watch all the big national corporations get the sweetheart deals and the preferential treatment. And so who better than me? And I just started by putting one foot in front of the other.
I love that you tell that story because it reminds me of another story that I heard you tell, I think at a storytelling concert that Doug hosted. This was years back, but you were telling a story, and I think it was about place. And there was a woman who again had struggled to find a sense of place, and I think in the story, at least as I remember it, you invited her to meet you at a locally owned coffee shop or restaurant, and that sense that she expressed to you of, oh, there is a place here. I just wasn't able to see it. Does that ring a bell for you? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, she was a professor at ASU. She got a job on the brand new downtown campus, and she moved here from Europe, where she had lived for 10 years. She was an American living in Europe, but she'd lived for 10 years without a car. But of course, when she came here, the people at ASU told her, you don't want to live downtown. Certainly don't. They told her, and I'm quoting, don't go into the avenues after dark. And she had a realtor that showed her a condo in North Scottsdale. So here's this woman who hasn't lived, she's lived without a car for 10 years, and now she's living in her car, right? This is a 45-minute traffic jam, trying to get to work, zipping back out to that part of town where there was no sense of place. And as soon as I showed her around and took her into Lux, she literally said, well, here's everybody. And she ditched that, moved downtown, and ended up staying. It's just that she didn't have the right introduction to our place.
Right. And just so you know, I am born in Arizona also. So, yeah.
Right.
So growing up in Arizona, like for you, what are some stories or experiences that just really connect you to this place? What's unique and special and wonderful about it?
You know, there are many things to choose from, but I'm lucky that my parents used to throw us kids in the van and we would travel all over. And so I think by the time I was 10, I had visited 10 Arizona lakes. and we would, you know, pack the van and go out and camp and experience different places all around Arizona. I also think there's something special in that the power structure in Arizona is not as is steeped in generational power and wealth as it is on the East Coast, which means that you can easily gain access to a mayor or even a governor's cell phone, right? And or congressional leadership. And so always felt that Arizona was a place where a small group of people really could impact change. We don't, you know, it's a double-edged sword being such a young state. But the good part of that is that you really can influence, the outcome here. Other things that I remember growing up here, just, you know, I grew up in Glendale, and we had our house backed up to Min Takaguchi's farm, where all kinds of fresh food was constantly being grown, and all of the kids at the school we knew the farmers. We'd ride on their tractors, and it was really a special place to grow up. I think Glendale had maybe 38,000 people when my family was there, and today it's whatever, 130,000. It's a big city. So those things were really special to me, and I think they really connected us. My entire family stayed here, even though my father was originally from Northern California and my mother from the South. And so my brothers are here, and my nephews are here, and I think we'll stay.
I'm really glad to hear that. So as I've learned more about the work of Local First, I've just gotten a better and better understanding that there's all the work and advocacy of the businesses, and then there's the policy work. There's the fact that Local First is working in rural Arizona, in the urban centers, working. You talked about the memory of the farm, working towards a healthy food system here. When you think about all those different aspects of work, who are some of the people and what are some of the organizations that you see as essential to kind of keeping you inspired and motivated and keeping us all working towards this inclusive economy here?
There are many, and so I could break them out by the different areas of work. I think in the policy realm, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance is really one to watch. They're focused right now on encouraging our federal government to enforce existing antitrust laws, because our corporations are just growing so big that it's going to eliminate competition, and that's really bad for the economy. In the rural space, I think Strong Towns is doing some wonderful work. Chuck Marone founded that organization, and they're doing some fabulous policy work. In the built environment, I'd like to acknowledge incremental development. Incremental development is doing great work around encouraging and diversifying real estate and investment. And as we know, real estate has really alienated and divested from communities of color. And so we really need to work hard to diversify opportunities for investment and spread wealth across real estate, particularly in underserved and marginalized areas. Food systems work, there's so many to name around the country, just organizations doing fantastic work who are thinking about protecting urban agriculture and lands associated with agricultural development, and also localizing supply chains for our food. You know, we live in an area here in Maricopa County that is in the top 10 most vulnerable of big cities for being able to feed ourselves. And that's a real crisis that not too many people have their eye on. And certainly with shifting power and shifting wealth and shifting opportunity, Common Future, which is based out of the Bay Area. It used to be called Bali, now called Common Future. They're doing tremendous work to really shift wealth and capital.
Thanks for sharing those. I know that you and Local First over the last few months of the pandemic have just rallied and brought people in to support local businesses, especially really small ones. Are there any just any stories or moments or conversations that you can share about what it's been like to create that program uh, just while flying it?
Yeah. hmm There are so many. It has been at once the most challenging and the most rewarding work I've ever done. We have raised almost $2 million and distributed that in $2,500 increments for the most part to small businesses across Arizona. And I think people don't realize how many people around them are self-employed, you know. So it's the electrician and the plumber, it's the beautician and the barber, it's the food truck operator or the esthetician, or there's so many people that we interact with all the time who may just have themselves or somebody from their family doing the work. And these businesses have just been decimated. So one story that stands out to me, I spoke with a woman that was a beautician in Tucson, and she ran her own salon, and she had been completely shut down. And she mentioned in the interview on the phone that she had her two granddaughters lived with her. So it was just the three of them. And it got to the point where she could no longer afford her apartment and her salon. And so she made the decision to give up her apartment and move with her two grandchildren into her salon, where she lived for 3 months. And the way she explained it to me, she said, I've cut hair for 40 years. I'm almost 60 years old. How am I going to work if I lose my salon? This is everything to me, is my client list and my ability to run this business. So if I give it up now, we're going to end up on social services for the rest of our lives. So she said it was at once a difficult but also an easy decision because she had to do it. And that gives you a sense of the desperation of a small business owner right now and how vulnerable they are when their livelihood has been ripped away from them. We have prioritized businesses that have no business owners that have no other source of income and children in the household. I also worked with a gentleman that runs a fitness center in the town of Superior. It's the only gym they have in the whole town. He and his wife run it. The gym is closed, mandated closed, and they have 5 kids at home. There are many ways to look at that as a crisis. It's a crisis for their family, but it's also a crisis for their town, because if they lose the one fitness center they have, that impacts everyone there and their health. So it's been critical that we get in and provide the necessary funds to help these folks pay their bills so that they have something to go back to. I had a conversation with the governor here. In all honesty, what I'm talking about is the potential for 100,000 people who were previously completely self-reliant, suddenly not being self-reliant and having to rely on social services. That is the crisis that we are facing here in Arizona, and we need to move as quickly as we can to provide these families with the relief that they need.
That really brings us, I think, to that question about the story of now, what we need to do now. I know that over the years, Local First has done a great job both presenting the data, but then also telling those stories about the importance of buying local from local businesses, because of the way that money stays in the community, builds more jobs, builds that kind of resiliency, and then also the importance of investing local, you know, being with local banks that invest into the community. What would you amplify to both of those messages or add to it in this moment to really meet both the need and the opportunity that you're talking about?
Well, I think that the most important thing for folks to remember is I always like to ask people to analyze this word convenience. because a lot of people will say they choose to shop online because it's more convenient. And I would ask them to do their best to think in terms of generations instead of thinking in terms of this afternoon. Because if we all choose this concept of convenience, we're going to find ourselves in a place where the next generation has no job opportunities that pay a living wage, or no job opportunities at all. And that's not convenient, right? That is most definitely not convenient when the majority of our people don't have access to jobs and opportunities to feed themselves and their families. And so I think right now it's important for people to dig deep and prioritize relationships. And whether it's getting to know your immediate neighbors or getting to know the business owners in your community, in the middle of a crisis, people tend to pull inward and close their door. And now is actually the time we need to find avenues to create relationships and to get to know the people in our community and those needs. So I think that's primarily my message, that in the story of now, it is really prioritizing relationships.
And how would you, let's say 5 years from now, you could imagine yourself looking back and saying, this is what happened in Arizona?
Mm-hmm.
How would you tell that story?
Well, I think what that looks like to me is we transition from being in the bottom 10% to being in the top 10% for civic participation. We tend to register low numbers of voters and even fewer people turning out at the polls. It will look like investing in education, which means that we are no longer a state that is focused on the immediacy of real estate development, and instead we're thinking about long-term solutions. We're investing in agriculture and understanding that we need to be able to feed ourselves and we need to be thinking about sustainability. We will be prioritizing green businesses and opportunities for us to survive here in the deserts 10, 15 years from now. We will be investing in formerly marginalized communities and prioritizing them, knowing and understanding that diversity is our strength. We will be really investing in our rural communities and understanding the important role that they play in keeping a robust Arizona economy alive. So these are all decisions that we have to make, and we tend to develop policies and follow along in short-sighted, short-term opportunities. And unfortunately, because we're a frontier community, we were really founded on coming out here to each his own, and we're going to come out here and do something for ourselves. And we're transitioning into a state that thinks more collectively, more collaboratively, and certainly more strategically about how we're going to survive.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Amy, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you both, Kimber and Amy. There's so much to discourage us and to divide us today. And you are two people doing good work in the world that's helping to bring us together. So thank you for your good work and your words today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Doug.